Hoi nora, kia ora tātou. Timata nei te karakia, whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara i tai. E hi aki ana te ātā kure he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. Honora nau mai piki mai hara mai. Hara mai ki runga i tō tātou marae o rongo marairua, ki mui te karanga nei o tō tipuna whare te hona ki Hawaiki, anō rā te tipua kaino ko Māui tiki tiki a taranga e pū whakarunga, e pū whakararo nei ki a tātou i tēnei rā. Nō reira koutou rā, pīkaungi o koutou mate o te wā, hei aha, hei mihi hei tangi ki a rātou. Nō reira koutou rā, kei ngā kuru paunama, kei ngā moitoi kahaurangi, haere, haere, haere koutou rā. Haere koutou, ki te kāinga whakarite nei mō koutou, mō i mārina mai koutou, ko tēnā te pō, nau mai te ao. Kia ora tātou, mauri ora ki te whai ao, ki te ao mārama. Hoi nora koutou rā, kei ngā mana, kei ngā reo, kei ngā whakamataku, nau mai, piki mai, hara mai. Hara mai ki tēnei kaupapa whakanui nei i tā rānei, he kōrero mo i nei taonga, me te whakarewa anō nei o te pukapuka nui nei i tā rānei. Nō reira, nau mai i rungi te aroha, nau mai i rungi i te karanga nei o te whare. Hei te pāpā, maunga hararu, te maunga, mohaka te awa, pā Ngāti Pāhau wera te hapu, Ngāti Kahangunu Tiwi, tēnei, mai a heretaunga hauku nui, heretaunga ararau, kia wairua, hō pupu, hō nengene, mātangi rau, tēnei te mihi ake. Tēnei te mihi ake nei, i runga i te hononga, mai rāno nei tēnei, e mihi nei, e mahi nei, mō te papa tongorewa. Nō reira, e kore tai te mihi nei, te ngākau, te hinengaro, te whatu manawa, e kore ngā mihi nei, e kore tai te mihi mou e te papa. Hoi nora he mihi ki a koe Ruben, ko koe te tumu whakarai o Pātaka, me o koutou kaimahi, e whakahaere nei, te whakātioranga nei, taonga nei, nui, a toi kuru nei, kei tō whare pupuri taonga. Anō te hari, te tino hari ko. Nō reira, e heka mā, koutou nau mai, piki mai, hara mai. Look, I just want to welcome everyone today. It's a real honour and privilege to welcome Sandy back to your house, your whare, to our house. And look, we're honoured and privileged to have you here. It was an honour and privilege to speak at the opening of the Toikoru exhibition, and I just want to acknowledge Ruben, Pātaka, and the kaimahi there for that fantastic exhibition. But we really look forward to Sandy, and as I was saying, you're part of this whare, and the history of this whare, and the aspiration of the whare. And I can recall I was here actually when this whare was being built, and the creative energy, you could feel it, you could see it, you could hear it. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity for you to speak about these taonga and speak about Rongo Maraeroa and the aspiration from you, Cliff, and the many artists, Bob, Robin, Kura, Darcy, that contribute to making this taonga. So mai ia mao ko Courtney, me ngā kaimahi o te Papa Tongarewa, he mihi nui ki au koutou katoa. And look, I just want to acknowledge Tamahau, Toi Māori, Creative New Zealand, Toi Aotearoa, and everyone here. I know the Puka Puka and Ruben will follow me with some words. Look, this is fantastic. And Sandy, you've always been my favourite artist. I don't know, because we share the same iwi. But we also went to the same school, Te Aute College. So whakatangata kia kaha is firmly inscribed in my heart and my head, and I know that's carried you, and I know that when you were at Te Aute, when we returned there to help, my son was there, and he was inspired by your art and the core whaiwhai, and I've always been inspired with your art. So it's our privilege to have you back in your whare, our whare, today. Nō reira, koutou rā e heka mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Tukua atura, te reo pohiri hiri atu, o te iwi Māori, e tūne I te mea ngaro, I waihotia e ngā matua. I waihotia e ngā matua. I waihotia e ngā matua.
No reira, narongi te kōra akti hono, tātai hono, rātou te hunga wairu kia rātou, hoki ora mai kia tātou, ko tēnā te pō, nau mai te ao, kia ora tātou katoa. Ruben.
Ki te atua, te whare, ana pononga kai roto, tēnā koe, tēnā tātou katoa. A ka tautoko au ngā mihi, kua mihia e arapata. No reira, ko whakarā, popoto, toku. Kōrero te atanei. My name's Ruben, friend. Thank you, Arapata, for all of your acknowledgements. I endorse all of them strongly. I was also 2 years too late to be involved in this whare. I went to Toi Haukura in 2000, and this whare opened in 98, but it left quite a strong impression on all of us students. It was the example on a national scale of what contemporary Māori art, particularly coming out of the Tairāwhiti region, could be. And working on this project was an opportunity for me to take a lot of that knowledge, a lot of that energy that Sandy had passed on to me as well as all the other students, and put it down into writing for us to remember so we don't forget. And I think having you here today, Sandy, is another way of expanding some of the knowledge that's in the publication in another format. So we're filming today, so I hope you all don't mind being on the internet forever, because it's kind of capturing that mātauranga for others to remember. And so I'll just say one thing. One of the things that I learned through the process of interviewing Sandy over the last 2 years for this publication is that actually Mohaka it's a little tiny road basically going to Raupunga, but there were some amazing whare that came out of there and in the Tairāwhiti that still continue to have creative influence on Māori art and design today. And actually this whare here has a lot of those traits, a lot of those colours, and I'm just really excited now to kind of understand the whakapapa of this particular art form, of this particular whare. And we did that in the publication through interviews with Sandy, but also Bob Yonkei's got an excellent essay in there where he really kind of analyzes Sandy's art form, probably more than Sandy himself realizes. As well as the art, you've had such an influential career in terms of curatorial practice, influencing Ngā Puna Waihanga, Creative New Zealand, Toi Māori, and so it was hard to just write a straightforward art history, you know. Most artists, you go, they did this painting, then they did some other paintings, but you're like, I'm going to change the entire arts infrastructure and education program across the country. So your influence is more than just art. So thank you, Mikoto, for stepping up to interview Sandy today, and thank you, Sandy, for being here, and Arapata and Courtney and everyone here at Te Papa for making this space. And of course, to our friends from Pātaka and the friends of Te Papa who are here as well, and everyone else. So, ko ti tēnei, mihi no tēnei uri o te wakataunui, kia koutou ka haungunu, koutou nei o te upoko o te ika, tēnā tātou katoa, ka oti.
huri taku aro kia tātou, ki tēnei kaupapa. Te tūmanako kia tutuki pai, kia aro haina, tiaki pai tēnei wā kei wanganui a tātou. He wā iti tēnei, he taonga te wā, nō reira ko tāku noiho he tiaki tēnei iti hui te kotai haora ne, te roanga o tēnei kaupapa. Nō reira tēnā tātou, my name is Migoto. Who on earth is, who am I? I work at Te Papa, and I just wanted to declare something. This is not a kahungunu takeover, even though it really looks like that, but also that it's not a Pāwera takeover. So I'm from Ngāti Pāwera as well, my mother's side. My nanny is a Waihape, and so all of those things that Ruben had just mentioned, and which also feature in the Puka Puka, that's a pathway to my ngākau, you know, so I can see myself and my tupuna, I can see my tupuna also in that kōrero. So to tapiri to all the mihis this morning, there's a lot of mihi to get through. Firstly, Ruben, thank you for not only this kaupapa, but also that it's, you know, I think about how long these taonga have been in this whare, how long this whare has been up, and we're only just starting to have these conversations. So we would not be here with the likes of yourself and your whare and your kaimahi and your drive and diligence to get this kaupapa done. So tēnā koe koutou hoki o pātaka. So I'm going to get straight to it. My job here is not to take up too much time with my talking, but to make sure that Sandy has the space and the wāhi to speak to all of the things that perhaps, for those of you who are Sandy fans, may not be featured in the Puka Puka, you may not be aware of in the exhibition as well. So hopefully we can touch on some of that magic through this kōrero. Nō reira tēnā koe, nau mai hoki mai kei wanganui a tātou, ki roto I tēnei whare wānanga me ki, o rongo mai rairoa o te Honokia Waiki. The reason I say nau mai hoki mai is that he was here before, I mean long before I was here, of course. And as you can see, we are surrounded by the ātāhua of Sandy's mahi today. And I just wanted to touch on this word ātāhua. The word ātāhua means beauty, yes, but it's also a word that is meant to resonate with the individual. Okay, so each of your perspectives of ātāhua or beauty is unique to you. So the ātāhua of this artwork is that it not only tells the stories, it tells whakapapa. I can see mohaka harara in these taonga. So also in the waiata that we just sung, ngā kura I waihote ngā mātua tupuna. Okay, so these are also taonga tuku iho that we will be talking about today. So I'm going to just, if we can just have a look around at these, particularly these two walls, and really absorb and look at what's on these walls, and I'll get Sandy to probably just start talking about what was the inspiration of the kaupapa of your mahi in Rongorairua.
Okay. Well, kia ora tātou, and thank you for the opportunity to further, I think, our journey that was 25 years ago for here, and it's taken 25 years of, with that generation to realise the importance of the work for the rangatahi who worked on the panels at that time. I was saying to someone that, 25 years ago, the students that we had, they're the age I am now. I was then. They are that age now. They could be directing this type of mahi easily because they are coming in with a knowledge base and an experience way beyond what I had when I started. But what is the difference is that with every generation, you're starting at a point of knowledge and you've got an open field for yourself. So for me, when I started out, from the traditional experience that we knew, and then having to introduce it into schools as part of the curriculum, meant that you had to adjust your thinking. And besides teaching it, we felt, fortunately, we needed to practice it, and that's where our engaging with Pene Taiapa, who gave us the go to really do that type of mahi. It was so encouraging because he realised that the rangatahi and the schools needed to have that area of noa to allow them to engage in mahi that was considered to be tapu. So that was the first big hurdle of taking you beyond that, the era of that time. And then as we, as younger artists, Cliff and Para and all the rest, you know, we, our work together with Pene meant that it influenced our own art. Yeah, before that, I was painting portraits and vases of flowers and landscapes, because that was the art I was taught. And Para and we all did the same thing. And as we were, through Pene, made to realise the importance of our art to him, and you know, and his history and his tradition of coming to that point where and it's great because he said, I wasn't in the accepted family to be the one that was going to carry the whakairo, but he just went along and sat there every day as a young person until eventually, you know, and like after a year or so, he'd just go get everything, and they just sort of threw a chisel at him one day and said, here, have a go, young fellow. And then, you know, and through his work, and that's how he began an involvement that brought those 100 meeting houses together. He was part of that, and you know, knowing that and seeing the work and his dedication, he sold us on the importance of our culture and what it meant for us to want to be Māori. And you know, we were, and all through with all our, you know, with the tertiary time with our students, even now, I mean, I just retired in July, I kept saying, I'm hoping to get a commitment from you to attend to our culture through the arts, because Pene said to Para, Matchett, when he was in hospital in Gisborne, and I was working in Gisborne during that time, but Para went to visit him, we all went to visit him, and he came and Pene, he realised he wasn't going to recover. And he said to Para, he said, the art is important for us. He said, because I worry that our language may go. And he said, but we'll still have the language of art to identify us as a culture and to say the stories and tell the stories that we needed. So, you know, we then realised you have to, you know, you learn here, and you go back as far as your own experience can give you. So for me, I can go back to Pene's time. For these young ones, they can come back to my time. The one before that, they just have to take our word for it, that, you know, that is important to you. But having the evidence of the work for them means that this place needs to be part of supporting the art and its offering. You know, I looked at how the place is described, and, you know, it's a contemporary whare. And it is, Cliff and I, everyone, but we all had arguments, you know, about what we were doing in here, because we're virtually working in a space that, yeah, and there was a lot of hui initially with Api Maui, everybody, they used to come in, because we were part of the design planning at the time, and we said, okay, this place, yep, it can do that, this is what it will do, and we said, yeah, that's great. But all those things that we said at the time, this is what we'll do, didn't really happen at the level it should have, because I think the newness of Te Papa and the requirement of the institution took over perhaps some of the, you know, the other dreams of the people that were involved. But it's not, when I say, it's still there, and it's still as important as it was when it was suggested way back then. So, you know, I'm hoping to, that's why I thought, oh, we'll come with a few challenges as well, because I looked and, you know, I thought I'd better seeing that I was coming here to talk, you know, and I was looking at the description of the place and how it's used. And yeah, especially the ones for, like the lessons for schools. And I thought that instruction may be suitable for children up to the age of 10, but then on from that, there is not enough, you know, researching and understanding of what the patterns actually mean. It doesn't mean, they're too young to understand the Māori and everything else that is in the work, and once explained, it can be there. So, you know, I mean, even the fact that, you know, everywhere, places that I looked, I thought, okay. So they talk about the rongomaraido or the whare and everything else, the doors and everything. When they talk to the sides, they say, oh, and the tukutu is on the side, and I thought, it's got nothing to do with tukutu, and it's just referred to, you know, and we know that this side is taha Māui, and that's taha mātua. So, you know, immediately, and one's curvilinear, they're addressing the designs of whakairo, of kōwhaiwhai, tāmoko, curvilinear. And that one there is rectilinear. It's in all the geometric, the tāneko, the tukutu. That's the construct of those designs. The colours and everything are, you know, has the same reason for being the one. That colour palette had to be for these patterns because you're reflecting, ascending to heaven, you know, going up through some of the stories of, through the roots of the tree and what it means and the style, the tukutu, that's all had to be, you know, every board had to be bored through. Yeah, we went to the Moaka River and gathered the keke, and then we had people from Santa Fe, didn't we, who came with us from the Institute of American Indian Arts. And they, you know, we were sharing what we were doing with other Indigenous cultures. Went to Taranaki and to Whanganui to get the black sand. You were gathering all the things that talked about the whenua in the process of the work. So, you know, we felt, and it had to be in that depth of inquiry because we had students who were, you know, they're on a course heading towards a degree for some, and we needed to ensure that when they're talking or explaining what their work is about, it has a construct to it. It has a reason for why it has this way of, you know, moving forward. So, you know, we talk about tapu and no. So tapu, as you know, it's those things that are precious and sacred. Nor are the things that aren't. But you can make both sides. You can change a tapu to no if you give it the right karakia and do it, and vice versa if it's needed. So it is, you know, it's that Māori that you put in the work that we said, what is Māori art? And we always say, well, it can only be done by Māori because they believe in the Māori that the work represents. Otherwise, you're just creating an image that's a surface offering. So, you know, it's a belief. The tribal, you know, identity is huge because, you know, while we can still and comfortably throw off at each other tribally, because you expect to throw off tribally, you know, to another tribe, really saying we're mates. You wouldn't do it otherwise, you know damn well you'd offend them immediately. But as soon as they realise and they start to engage back, you're creating your immediate whānau to do that particular mahi that's needed at the time. So you know, and this is what this place did. And I know that in what was the workshopping that Cliff did with his amazing work, but you know, we did our work back at Toimairangi. So, and there was a reason for us doing it, as well as, of course, enjoying the fact that the work would be here at, you know, this new Te Papa. But we also were fundraising to go over to Europe, and, you know, And so we were off. The commission was $35,000 at the time. So he said, and of course the work was way more than that, but we were raising money. So we were able to use the tertiary institutions, materials, and during the time that they were there for their learning to achieve that. But it did allow us then to go on to New Zealand House to a number of places in Scotland and Ireland with our work, because we had the confidence of achieving something with this mahi. Nothing was then too big, because we thought, okay, you know, if we give ourselves a timeline and we know we can do it at this time, we will do it. And so the students, and they're still talking about it, we're working in, you know, after midnight doing this work. But everybody wanted to. We enjoyed being together. For some students, it was warmer than their flat anyway to be at the institute. So it's all of that I think for Te Papa, they can, in their consideration of this whare, you know, the major space at the time that we were looking at was actually out there as well, because we said we could bring in marquees and do workshops out there. You know, we could turn it into a place, because they said to us, yes, we could bring in mattresses and everything, and it was, they meant it. You know, the idea was that, but of course the Te Papa itself, it needed so much that, of course, we had to wait. But then I think we got forgotten, you know, along the way, but it's still there. So I'm going to use this opportunity to really, you know, not only because the work you need to look at, but it's to appreciate the skill of the designers. They, as I say, at that stage, that comes through because of Māori art in schools that we didn't have with, and tā moko, you know, the way that art discipline is going is amazing. The rāranga, everything is growing so much, and but we still need to say what's its voice, and you know, who's using this voice, and how can we encourage that voice to remain as something that makes us ensure that we, like Pene, you show that you love it. You know, and he did. He just, every part of the day for him, the way that he spoke and the way that he put his you know, stories across, you just sat there and took it all, and it just washed over you and washed over you and it made you feel really, really good. And I think that I'm hoping that this place will, if it's not doing a washing and making people feel good at this point, then I hope it does. Because, you know, sometimes when I look at it and I thought, oh, it looks like a nice place to have a wedding or a banquet. But, you know, if I'm looking at it for Māori, what should it do? Because Māori are proud of the place. The artworks are here. But it's, I think, I don't know, we were talking about the restoring, and I thought this is a time for a new lot to allow the new generation actually come in, and then it'll continue to be a contemporary place, something that, because otherwise it's just going to get old and wear. And I know Cliff, he always had this dilemma with the Historic Places Trust. He said with the old whare and the restoration of, and you know, and so he was in this mind. He said, we need to, you know, preserve it. We can do this. We can harden the timber. We can. He said, but it has its own life. Its life expectancy for the tribe was that it did its job, then it returned. You know, it returned to the earth, and you started a new one with a whare that can attend to the needs of that generation and the things that they needed to strengthen as a resource for themselves. So, you know, you know that a lot of our marae, for some of the whānau, because they moved from, in our day when we were rural, through to you know, this urban, that they can't afford to take two pāpaku back to the marae. It's too expensive, you know, and things like that. And So, you know, how do we ensure that our marae is able to change its colour to allow things to happen that will also be acceptable? So,
Oh,
so
no.
enough?
Awesome. No, rawe. So,
I'll
just a
sit
couple.
down.
Yeah, no, inho. There's a couple of pātai, and I think just taking that opportunity while we have the likes of Ao Kai Hautu listening, and then it's being recorded. And you spoke about the importance of the education mechanism and restoration
Yes.
as well. But what I guess the pātai is what should Te Papa be doing now? If we talk about restoration, but we take it into sort of a symbolic, you know, how are we going to, how can Te Papa best support our Māori artists or our up-and-coming artists to restore that knowledge in mind and heart? So in terms of talking about this taonga, what else should Te Papa be doing that it's not?
Well, if the Māori staff believe that they should be doing more, that's a good start. You know, and should they understand more? I've looked at it, and you know, there's Toiho Kura is spelled with H-A-U. You know, and it's H-O-U. You know, it's a new one, and so little things like that can, you know, whether, and I'm only being picky here, of course, but and knowing that, just to say, you know, if I said, what could you come up with that you believe you'd have to push for that would allow a whakairo workshop here, or a painting workshop out there, where we know that the space, even though it's closed off now for the filming, but in the main it has to be open. But if we were able, that was one of the things we said. That's our marae arte out there, you know. And in here, the whare is. I mean, we can say, do we still wish to continue with ideas that were left because we ran out of time, and we were more than conscious of the fact that there wasn't a tauhu in there. And we were going to go up the sides, we were going to connect up and everything else. It didn't happen. But we knew at the time when we were looking at it, it was needed. If we had to complete the work, it was needed. And so, you know, even revisiting that as a way of making it more than just referred to as a contemporary Māori meeting house, or, you know, because it can look like a cop-out. You know, that it's just attending to the fact that it can do all these other things that is, and that the place is able to attend, as I say, like the dinners and you know, you're hiring it out. But for Māori, when they walk in here, and I remember saying, you know, when we went to visit Ngātai's whare, and saying, you know, what did you intend to achieve in terms of the place? What was the feel of the place? Because I remember years ago when I was talking with Tipene O'Regan, and he said, our whare don't feel like sleeping houses now. You know, and we were saying, yeah, they are starting to look like classrooms with huge windows and everything else. You know, but he was talking about that feeling that, you know, and you knew you could walk into a place and it felt good, and you wanted that. You know, for Pene, he would say, you need to, that's a requirement when you go there. You look at the art, what are you feeling from that? It needs to have some way of giving you an understanding of the hapu of this area. And I mean, this is one of the things, you know, for me here, when I was looking at, I mean, anyway, I like blue, but blue is that big expanse area. You know, blue is the sky. We were driving in today and the sea was bluey green, but it's a big expanse area. And we needed to take it up the walls because it wasn't going up the walls, only going halfway. So we had to actually make the movement go. So you work on those sorts of things. And, you know, I knew that Clifford, knowing his work, that it would be strong, his style of work, and he'd have a lot of colours. So I said, well, we can't have too many colours, otherwise it's going to go like that. So I said, we'll reduce our colour palette down to quieten the side so that it could allow for, hopefully, a space that as we connected to the spaces to create the poho of the whare, that it would hopefully, in terms of its mauri, have a way of being seen. You may have to direct, you know, people to see it, but that's no different from any wānanga way of learning. You have to appreciate and show by example from one example to another what you're meaning about what is Māori art. So, once we identify that, then the intention of it, and you know what the place was that needed to be offered this resource of a whare, and then you did your best to try and make that happen, and yeah. So if you're asking me what should Te Papa do, I think, you know, if they talked about even just to start with, you know, understanding the disciplines of our art and what they're about, rather than give me a sheet and say, go and look for how many birds can you find. You know, for a school, that doesn't say anything about the importance of the bird. You tell the story and say, here's a story, and you need to find these things in it. And, you know, and for a teacher, it depends on and if you're, you know, over in Europe, the artists used to go in and copy, we all did that, I'm not saying in Europe, but we used to copy a master, and you know, I remember at teachers' college we did that, and you picked out one that you liked, and you were told you've got to make it as close as you can as a copy of 3 of them. And all it was about you learning the techniques of how you get the effect of colour, the washes, the composition, the spaces, anything. That was your way of learning the discipline, upskilling of the technique itself. So, you know, I think that can still be applied for ourselves if we're looking at, you know, workshops. You look for a particular one and say, and what you're also is being able to say, as an outcome, we are trying to achieve this. And we're going to use these people who have experienced takahunga, wherever it is, and, you know, and they come in and part of it, because for us, it's a people thing. You know, you're just showing a video or something. I think, you know, people relate to the relationships that you have, and we enjoy each other. Like any culture, we do a lot of interaction with First Nation, Native Americans, Inuit, and Poland, you know, with Hawaii, and we enjoy the relationship. We respect each other's stories, and it makes us stronger. So, you know, for Māori to make themselves stronger doesn't mean to say it has to happen in Aotearoa. It may have to happen elsewhere. But, you know, if you go with something that others can not only learn from, but they see it as empowering their own arguments for their own work. So, you know, we're dealing with Evergreen State College in Washington, and their first campus, American campus at that stage, with a longhouse, you know, and they went to everybody, yep, great, and it's going really well. But the institution itself is now trying to dictate, okay, maybe we could do this with this culture, maybe we could do, and you know, and it's in its own way, it's just lessening what they see is their responsibility and what they have been working on for the last 20 years, because they came and got our model, and that began this interaction. And they know they built a whare over there, a weaving whare that's got, a half Māori and half the Skokomish, I think was the tribal group there, and it's those sorts of things. Our young ones went over, and as they said, 17 years ago was it when we first went? They said it was great seeing our rangatahi, our students that we took over there as part of that first gathering after an initial one in '95 at Apumoa and in Rotorua, that they're coming back as the committee people now and bringing others there. And so, it takes a while to get to a space where you may feel, okay, we're in a healthy space. I don't know whether we're in a healthy space. We're in a space, but I don't know, how healthy until our own ones feel that they can take their mahi to a place and it would be at least attended to in a respect because the people who are receiving it believe that there's a value there. And if we've got to show what that value is, then, as I say, we've still got to continue with it. And as our own rangatahi change and their interests change, all we would want to have is that they can do it as much as they like and they can enjoy it. And I think I was talking to Ngāhui, who were doing something last week, and Te Awa Kōtuku, and in the conversation I said to her about how years ago I was heading back to Gisborne and I passed through Wairoa and there was 3 Māori girls hitchhiking. So I picked them up and I was talking to them, and they were 16 or 17. And I said, where did you stay last night? Because they'd come from Southern Hawke's Bay somewhere. And they said, we stayed in our motel, and they started to laugh, and I thought, where did you stay? And they said, we stayed in the toilet. And I said to them, you could have gone to the marae, and as we're going there, and they were sort of talking about the things they're joking amongst themselves as we were driving. And then one of them said, it's stink to be Māori. And it was the fact that the 2 other girls said, yeah, immediately. It wasn't any thinking about, they said it immediately. And I thought, oh God, we have let these people, we've let our kids down. If we haven't done enough to make them feel proud of being Māori, we're the ones that are at fault. We've allowed things to happen, and this is how they are. So, that was something that I thought I'm going to hopefully ensure that our students, we fed them, we did everything, to make them part of the family and enjoy what they did, and they did at that time. So, yeah, I know it's roundabout and long-winded,
No.
but if you're wanting to, to see what Te Papa should do, there's a lot there's a lot it can do and find that it can do. It's for you to find it and really argue for it, because they're going to be blocks, when you're bringing in something new. But we're out, our ones are out there saying, they're looking at this place and virtually saying, okay, is that, besides a marae on a whare on a marae, in this one here, it has a national profile. So I'm hoping, we've been looking at the Smithsonian, because they've got a major, Native American focus. And one of our colleagues, artists, the one that we know, Nora Morse, the weaver, and she created a work for the Smithsonian that has to be attended to like every 2 or 3 years. She makes it in a format that it needs, and she said it has to be kept alive, I suppose, like a Māori bread bug, that you've got to keep it, you've got to keep adding to it. But it meant that they had to then attend to it differently from something that they acquired and stuck on a wall. It was a structural thing, and the rest of when that step forward was taken, with the others came in and they all started to say the same thing. So if I was looking at that, say I'm not saying this, but if I thought, okay, what's missing from here, and I'd say, okay, we don't really, if it was a structure, we don't have a tahu, we don't have a po, and so these are at the back, they can be changed and everything, but there may be contemporary po that do the job to uphold the tahu at the top, and at least it will start to give a feeling when you're walking in that it is acknowledging us as a culture. For us at the time, we were just looking to, this is a good pūtea to take us to Europe, and that was the beginning. But, as I say, things changed during the time. We certainly put a huge amount of effort into the works. All the drill holes, they had to be lined up, the layering of they had to be all PVA glued, clamped down overnight, and everything had to be into place. The type of clay that was being done that was broken up and was representing the clay that was wrapped around birds for the cooking. The relating of the materials to us as a culture was what had the depth of that required mauri that we felt needed to be invested in the work. And so, yeah.
No, rawe nei kōrero. I just wanted to ask, and you've started to touch on them, some of the specific examples of 25 years ago, Te Papa was being formulated conceptually, and just what exactly were some of the challenges as a Māori artist that you faced? You started talking about actually this only went halfway up the wall, where actually there was some more interpretation that needed to happen. What were some of the examples that you experienced at that time, coming into a Western construct, into a framework, to uplift and uphold our mana of our taonga and things like that?
One of the things that I had as an issue, I was always suspicious. I couldn't help it. When we were looking at the design of the different offerings of this place, there were like 5 different designs for here. And I don't know, so initially, some of the original designs that came in, it was what I would call like the Sydney Opera House, and that it looked impressive from the outside. It looked stunning, and the marae was virtually the entry to here, to the building. However, and even though he's not around now, well, I won't say who, but there was an argument that was put forward that the whare needed to face east, and it was facing the along the fault line. So I said, and then we ended up at the top and then at the back. We started at the front, and the things were stunning. But our own kaupapa then meant, and it was an argument you couldn't argue against a joker, which we totally respected. But I thought, so our issues were amongst ourselves, trying to really decide on what we could get through. You got down to that. You thought, okay, perhaps and as we were expecting to, we can sort of grow it once it started.
There was some footage at the development of Te Papa, and it was with Cliff and I think the chair of the board at the time. Is that right? And let's just say it wasn't a discussion, and it was putting Cliff into a really, really difficult position about the intention of the marae and who it was for.
Yes.
And I think there was an overtone of the board wanting control of that, wanting to determine who the marae was for, other than Māori people.
Yes.
And what I actually looking at it now, I think it was really about language. You know, this is for mō tātou katoa mō Aotearoa. But actually, Cliff says actually this is for Māori people first. What do you think about that?
And then they employed him and he had to toe the party line. It's sort of, I don't, Cliff and I were good mates, we really were good mates, but, and at times, it was no different from, and it's true, trying to put Māori art as part of the school syllabus and involvement. And there was a lot of, we knew there's going to be resentment and rejection by non-Māori teachers. And it was, and they would use any argument. So we made sure that Whakairo book showed a young Pākehā girl carving, just to say, this is coming through. And it had Pene's sanction to it, it had gone through. It was, they used to say to us, go back home and see how the home people feel about what we're doing, putting Māori out into schools. So I went back and went to the whānau at home. It was Turi Carroll's daughter. And when I told her, she said, what are you asking us for? That's what you're meant to be doing. That's what we put you there for. You make the decision. And they always say, but don't you make a mistake. But really, and I thought, yeah, it is unfair to ask them to respond to something. They say, you go back and ask the kaumātua, but you've got to reassure them, or at least give them 4 options so they can select one. But, when you're going and say, this is it. So I can't remember what the question was.
Just thinking about this marae intending to be for everyone of Aotearoa, and then Cliff's argument was taihoa priority is our iwi Māori.
Yeah. So where did it end up?
Oh, well, I think some bit of skin and hair flying in that that discussion. But what it does raise a question, and it's a question that we still battle with today.
Yes.
We have events here like this one, but we also have banquets and all sorts happening on this in this wāhi as in contemporary marae. But I guess going back to the intention of this concept, this kaupapa, do you feel that Te Papa is fulfilling a lot of the intention for this space, or what is it not doing, or what are we, are there things actually that we should not be doing?
There are obviously, areas where we have a focus, like just the artwork in here and what it can still do. But it's I believe that my team that's here needed, I hope will make it better than what we thought about during that time. That's back there 25 years. You've got stronger, other focuses that can be done, and more people to back you. I see that you engage with iwi, and you discuss with iwi. So if it was one where you had this take that you needed to do, then you say, well, tell everybody that we need. So you may say, with this area of development, we'll look at these 4 tribal groups. And then we'll have another one, we'll look at another 4 tribal groups, so that, you're not hitting the same group all the time, but at least you're also showing that you're covering everyone, and it's maybe you can get an answer, as long as there's not too many. As long as you come, I believe anything that, that Te Papa may wish to do now, is if they're, with how the use of the place is to identify it. But then you come up with at least 3 alternatives to how you may achieve that. Because like anyone goes to say, iwi would like to feel as though they had a say in the decision, rather than come with just one and you're just agreeing to it or not agreeing to it. So, yeah.
And do you think, I'm just going to push a whole lot of buttons now, do you think the marae is still in the right place in this whare?
It's too late for that. Yeah. Yeah. But, as I say, you know, out there is, this is when what's out there is so strong, is, you know, we should be out there as well. You know, I don't know. Are we able to? I love the Samoan whale, the one that, you know, it's open on the side. I think they're stunning. You know, why can't we create something out there that's an open space where you can have things? You're able to, with the way that things happen now, you can close them off. You know, and share, but the rest of the time it can be open, and it's just that people like to go out and, you know, and be part of it. But yes, I feel enclosed in here. It's sort of, yeah. So.
I'm just going to do a time check.
Yeah, it must be over time by now.
Okay. And I'm now just going to, Emma, is it all right to just open it up to see if there's any pātai in our last few minutes of this kaupapa? Emma's going to bring the mic. Oh, yep.
Kia ora, Sandy.
Sure.
Look, just one pātai in terms of just the kōrero for te rāpia ka hāngai pū nei ki te kaupapa whakairo.
Yeah.
And the curvilinear.
Yeah.
So ko ngā kōrero, ko ngā tauira e hāngai pū nei ki tērā kaupapa, e tikana tērā.
Yeah.
Yep. And this side over here with geometric patterns is that as acknowledgement and recognition of our other art forms with the colour palette.
I don't think we say other art forms.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
With
well,
our
I mean, the thing is,
and
yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's to give, because I tell you what, for Pene, he said the most expensive item in a whare was a tukuturu. He said time-wise, gathering the materials, dyeing it, preparing this, kako and everything else. He said the amount that effort that went into those, he said, was outweighed what they could do with once they had the wood and they were carving. So I think that, to continue to give respect for the mahi that people have to do to create the work is, but as I say, this is 25 years old, and it actually came through, a style of, everything is on an 8x4, the 1200 by 24 sheets of, custom wood. So it had to be planned to fit. So, it's those structures and everything, I think, today with somebody, we're looking at how do we keep it so-called contemporary and understanding what is meant, the importance of ensuring, and it is just to make sure everyone feels good, the bicultural realising of what the space can have as a value, that all those are good, but when you still have to put that modi in there to make it happen.
Kia ora, Sandy, and just one other. Was it always the intention, Sandy, when that kare anō kia mutu te whare me te marae? In terms of there was always a desire that it would be added to, an ongoing creativity to add it to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of the importance of the workshops, the investment of money that Te Papa was prepared to do with the whare here. I mean, the students, because it was a way of engaging with other tertiary institutions. So they came in from Northland, the Wihongi boys, Roy Toy, they came from everywhere, and now the ones from Toi Okura, there's guys were in and out, they spent most of the year down here, but we made what they were doing part of the course so it could happen. So, the value of that, they said we should still be able to have that. It was it was seen as the mana of the students being able to say that they worked under Cliff with the whare, this whare at Te Papa. You know, the value of that hopefully would be able to still be offered to rangatahi today. Same thing in some way. You know, it's, yeah.
How much freedom did the young artists working on their sections have to develop their own imagery, or did you?
As much as I allowed them? No. Actually, but in a way that's true, because it wasn't so much just, you know, we had a model. We had to create, there was a design format, everything, because all the things had to be cut. So you needed to ensure, and there was a level of offering. So if they didn't do it, you said, okay, you know, you go on the sides and do put the sandal on the sides of the board, you know, from the front. But I think it allowed for, no different from what, as I said, what Pene did. You know, he waited there for over a year just before they said allow him to pick up a chisel. So I think when you're asking them to do something, there's a challenge. If you take anything that they give, then they'll just, yeah. Well, I'm not saying that they would just do that, but they will think of heading off to the pub at the end of the day.
And one more addition to that, with the different materials.
Yes.
Because different artists have different expertise. Was that you selecting artists to work in those materials, or was it that those artists work in those materials and they were just happened to be part of the community, like with the clay in particular? No,
but they were all students at Toi Haukura, all of them. So, you know, and we covered all those disciplines, and we needed we talked about the elements of Papatūānuku and what needed to, hopefully we could use to ensure that we felt good about, what the offering was. It was, in our way, it was respecting the marae. So they already had that skill. For Toi Haukura, they actually had a 4-year, and it was only a diploma program at that stage, but they had a 3-year studio. So they were working every day full-time on their art for 7 years. So they were really, really skilled. A lot of them now are major artists in their own right. Absolutely they are. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe time for a couple more. One more. I'm bursting with a pātai.
Kia ora, Sandy, tēnā koe mō kōrero, whai ki te rongo. I just want to pick up on, how you talk about, and Arapata, I remember Cliff talking about this as well, extending the whare. And he also talked about outside as well. I remember him talking about, sculpture things out there, but using the elements, the rain, the wind. There's all this stuff that he had in his head. Yes. That he wanted that to continue. But I remember the conversations about the Pautoko Manawa of the tā who've been extended as well. And the reason why I know was because when we were working with him on this area, and as the interpreter, your role was to pull out his ideas in his head. Yes. Because most of it was in his head. Yeah. And so I remember sitting with him and having those discussions, and he would get hoha with me asking these questions. But it was because he said, Haniko, it probably isn't finished. Yeah. Maybe that's the future. Yeah. So, that might be, he talked about things coming up the wall, but I guess his time was coming to a close in terms of, him working into Te Papa. Absolutely. So maybe this is the thing maybe it is a wero to to Te Papa at, looking at how do we continue that contemporary feel. Because you're right, that was 25 years ago. What does contemporary mean now? We look at, if you look at what Lionel is doing in terms of his space, we look at technology. How do we bring that in? Because there are a lot of different artists, Māori artists, who are working in those different fields.
But this is a showcase, that's what I'm saying, it's a national showcase. So for our rangatahi now, well, they're not rangatahi. I mean, as I say, these ones are still, they're in their 40s and 50s. And they now have experience behind them. They would come in here and see a totally different image of what we had as our image during our time. And I think that's the importance. If we're going to support the identity of our arts culture, our Māori arts culture, then they have to have the platform to do it. And if Te Papa was part of that, educating, if you like, of ourselves as a culture and opportunity. And when I say educating, it's Māori who's doing that to us, to educate our younger artist in whatever format. Then the job is on, it's ongoing, because you've identified it as a contemporary. It needs to keep going. Finished.
I think so. Was there anybody else?
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Kia ora, Sandy.
Oh, kia ora, Norm.
Norm here.
Yeah.
Sandy, there's two things. I was touching on what Haniko just said about Cliff's vision for the place, and I was here at the same time, and I recorded Cliff with his visions, and one of them was actually the popo on the sides, a white on the other side, and they were to be turned, and any visiting artist could actually put pieces on those as contemporary art forms for temporary exhibitions.
Are they still blank?
Some are blank and some aren't, but that was a vision. And also the poles outside were for clamping artworks too, and they were going to be 3D sort of wind sculptures and things and all that sort of thing. So it was meant to be an ongoing art space. Yeah. And we have had some really good wānanga up here that we've had visiting artists and, tāmoko and all that sort of thing. That's a fantastic space. And this space oozes that sort of inspiration for up-and-coming artists, because it's what you've done here. Even though you say it's 20 years old, it's still very contemporary. It's still... And it's a major piece that has actually been controlled or created here, and it's still talked about and still is inspiration. Even when I go up to Tairāwhiti, you go around and you can see where a lot of that art has been inspired from. It's from you guys, And but the other question I was going to have is that your communication between Cliff and yourself when you created your tukutuku panels, you might have already talked about it, I came in late, but was there a communication between what was expected or what was wanted, or what was, or did you have free rein and with Cliff, or what happened there?
Well, he tried to. He'd say as we walked out, when you come back, we're going to have colour on your panels. I said, you just leave it alone. When you talked about this, I forgot about that one of Cliff's where you could turn the panels, because I thought, well, that's a good idea. So we have the means if we, and we could use respect of what Cliff was wanting to happen. We could have an exhibition up here of some of these artworks of these artists who did this work around the space. It's easy enough to create movable walls, even if it's for a short time. But at least it will then acknowledge, I think, what Cliff wanted, as I say, so the panels could be turned around. We could make the blank spaces, and we could have an exhibition. Because I know Fred Graham was talking about it, and Elizabeth. They said we need a national Māori art gallery, you know, because they're working on that one at Whangarei. And I thought, because that's, let's say that happens overseas now. And yeah, so as a way of telling another story, even if it's in that form, just for whatever short time that it needs, like any exhibition that changes. But we could have, instead of having to use the gallery set up out there, we could have our own space with its own wairua, and it would then be, you know, and we can attend to it with our own rituals, and that we need to maintain. I mean, the ritual side is a great ploy to keep control of of curators from it, especially if you're taking work overseas or into a mainstream gallery. We say, oh, and they say, oh, we'll do this, and the next thing. We say, oh, if you want value for your people who come in to see the art, our art, then I think the best thing is for them to see it as we see it. If we create an exhibition, they as Māori see it because we're wall-to-wall art, you know, I suppose we don't have a blank wall and one small painting in the middle because that's the focus. It's a different concept. So, yeah, you know, maybe we could do something that would make use of the space. Okay.
I just wanted to, get a pata. Sorry, I just in response to Norm's kōrero, I'm just looking at Carolyn in terms of our iwi residence program that started since this whare open.
No.
And behind these turnable whakairo is actually over here you'll see a whole lot of portraits. It's our wāhi maumahara.
Yeah.
So that there is, not to say it's what's happening is that we're starting to hark back to actually the purpose of the Wara Marae is we're wanting to, you know, hang up all of our pictures of all of our kaumātua that have worked here. But also behind some of them have key kaumātua's portraits.
Oh, right. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so each of them represent the certain iwi that came in.
Yes.
So that's, and we actually haven't maintained that whakaaro. I'm not sure where that might be at, Karen, what was the whakaaro behind that?
Part of that being said just quickly is that when we got together with yourself and with the artists, you know, getting together in the last couple of years ago, we all put the here and the whare. Part of it there too is that it's, and I suppose that's the opportunity going forward, a small space with how might we present and maintain the whakamaumahara area with those associated with the whare. So there's some ideas, and I think some ideas that came from you too to make digital or
Yeah. Yeah. Or you can suspend wall panels, you know, to apply works. It's easy enough to can create something that where they hang down in front.
Pono kia ora tātou, e tautoko ana I ngā kōrero. Kua horaina ki rina I tēnei o ngā papa mō Rono Maraero o tira ki te whare e tū nei mō te hono ki Hawaii, Sandy, pai te rono atu wō kōrero. O ngā pakitara e rua. That's great. Well, and as you know, I actually worked here as well before transferring over to Toi Māori, Sandy, right. And a lot of the kōrero that about this whare and all the other plans that were for the day one exhibitions before opening in February 14th, 1998. And certainly with the works that are on the panels in there. So there was a discussion at that time when Cliff was still here, was that the hope was that iwi would come in here either during iwi residencies while they have their exhibitions on, that they would name any of the pou and certainly the figures that were there. So some of these pou are named and hopefully that's still being carried on, the whakaaro there. Other iwi at the time left taona that were hidden either on the whakairo themselves from respective iwi. So that's been done. But I also realised there was a whole lot of other work that was wanting to be done. And so I think the kōrero that's happened here is great to actually revive and get that going, especially while we're all focusing inward in Aotearoa and don't have the capacity to go all overseas there. So within that, even from Toi Māori's perspective, we've offered to fill some of those gaps for whakairo and what have you, through our art form committees, because they're really interested in looking at, and they also were part of the construction of this whare as well.
Absolutely.
So it's great that you're talking about that, and certainly the staff at Te Papa here are hearing that. I'm sure there'd be backing from Creative New Zealand as well to do something like that. And you know, for us, we were all former members of this place here at Te Papa, and the dreams and aspirations of the people 25 years ago are still the same now. And I think it's a chance and opportunity to actually not talk about it, but actually do it. Because we're about doing and achieving, so, and not talking. Yeah, we talk, but you know, make sure that
somebody's
steps are
listening.
in place and we do it. Anyway, so I'm not sure if that was a question or not, but I certainly don't talk with your kōrero there, Sandy. Kia ora.
Very well.
Okay.
Is anyone else? I think we're wildly over time, but that's okay.
Oh,
This is important.
Come on,
Well,
that's all good.
hei whakakapi ngā kōrero pēr, tēnei te mihi ake kia koe, mō tō whai wāhi ki te hara mai ki te whanganui a tara, at this time when it's actually, you know, being in a different space other than your wāhi kāinga. We really appreciate you taking the time and the effort to come and share this kōrero with us. Definitely special, and it's really important. And well overdue as well. So tēnā rā wātu koe, and actually tēnā rā wātu koutou, hara mai ngātahi me Sandy. Kia koutou anō hoki, hara mai te tautoko i tēnei kaupapa. Thank you all for making the time to come and to hapai this kaupapa. I'm just going to ask if Arapata, mene tai te whakakapi a karakia, i te mea nau i timata. Tai. Goodbye.
Good.